What?
Oh my goodness, that was funny.
Yes, that was timed perfectly. The look on your face, Doc Foreman, was beautiful.
Beautiful.
Doc Foreman, you hit the button and then there's a sort of a 15 to 20 second delay and things happen in 15 to 20 seconds between when I hit the button and
Look at Tony's face. Look at Tony's face. Ooh, it was so close.
Emotions. I'm at Doc Foreman. I am one of the co-hosts and co-moderators and co-producers of the Suicide Prevention Social Media Chat. Very excited about tonight's guest. I feel like I say that a lot, and I want to just remind you all that we put a lot of thought into who we want to have on the show and why we think ideas are interesting. And we really do pick things that we think are important and interesting. I'm also excited to be talking about Crisis Text Line today. I've been on the advisory board for Crisis Text Line since, pretty much the beginning and since before they went live. And I'm really excited. We've had them sort of way in the distance past when they were a very new service on the Suicide Prevention Social Media Chat. And now they are a tech company that's been around several years, and stuff happened that I think is really important when you're talking about technology innovation and the way it affects crisis intervention. But before we get to that, I'm so excited to introduce you one of my co-producers, Mr. Tony Wood.
Howdy, everybody. I'm Tony Wood.
Hey,
Quantify,
Tony.
COO, co-founder SPSM, also a handy person to tweet at if you have any questions for our guests.
And also chair of the board.
I'm also the chair of the board of the American Association of Suicidology, suicidology.org. Join Suicide and the American Association of Suicidology today.
Bam! We're getting better at that every week. And we have one of my favorite people, also Dr. Bart Andrews, co-moderator, co-producer. Bart, say hi to the people.
What's going on, everybody? It is Dr. Bart Andrews at Behavioral Health Response, a groovy crisis agency in St. Louis, Missouri. We're gearing up, going to be at the National Association of Crisis Organization Directors and CUSA's sponsored Crisis Center Conference in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, near the Biodome, I am told. It might be near where the Biodome is. And I'm so excited to have CTL here. And Jen is amazing. I'm not going to say any more about Jen because I know you're going to introduce her, but I'm excited to be here. And if I get distracted at times, it's because I'm waging multiple battles with Russian Trump bots on Facebook. So I'll try to avoid that as much as possible. But sometimes you've got to lay down the law.
I'm really excited for our next guest. We have been wanting to have Jen James she has, let me just start. So one of my first experiences with Jen James was at the NASCOD conference. And this was in 2014, Bart? Can we believe it's been how many conference seasons? Two. But I feel like I miss you guys. I feel like it's been forever. And there were several highlights of that trip. Being in the cargo of a van with Tony Wood and Shy Lewis, on our way to get hot chicken, driving all over Nashville. And another one was playing Cards Against Humanity, where I learned things about Richard McKeon's sense of humor that will forever shape me as a human being. But one of the other fabulous people that I really got to meet at that time and really hang out with was Jen James. I have known Jen James now for a couple of years. She has a personality that is just made for social media, and we've been hoping to have her on the show, but shit happened. And so we've had to reschedule this actually a couple of times. I'm really excited because she is here in her role as Crisis Text Line. I've known her since before that role. Jen, say hello to the people and tell them about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. Like April said, I've been with Crisis Text Line before they started. I was also on their advisory board. I'm their founding supervisor. And right now, I'm the head of crisis counselors. So we have about 1,900 crisis counselors, volunteers, and I'm one of the heads of them. So I take care of them and make them happy. And I love unicorns, hence the horn. I thought I'd bring this out for first time for you guys. Figured you'd appreciate it the most. So. And I've been with Crisis Text Line in some form or another since the beginning. So,
and when I feel like you just got that job at this is my very, very warped sense of time. I found out about Crisis Text Line just as I was sort of moving to Baton Rouge, and I think was recruited for the advisory board. And I want to say in 2011, 2012. And so when did you come on and tell us a little bit about the journey of coming onto Crisis Text Line, because it's a relatively new service.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. I worked at Common Ground in Michigan with the lovely Amelia Leto, who was my work wife. I totally enjoyed that. It's kind of where I got my start, and I started a chat and text program there. And Bob Philbin, who is our Chief Data Officer here at Crisis Text Line.
SPSM alum Bob Philbin.
Love Bob Philbin. He reached out to my boss at the time, Lisa Tuberville, and was like, I'd like to have Jen come out, because he read an article or something, to an advisory board that we're having in New York. And Amelia, I'm like, I don't even know what this is. What is this Crisis Text Line, you know? And so Amelia and I look it up, and it's literally Bob and Chris. That's it. I'm like, I'm not fucking going to New York with two creepy dudes. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen. And
you know exactly what's going to happen.
I know. I'm like, you know, I married a nerd. I know those shit's freaky. So so anyways, Amelia's like, you better go. And so I went on the trip, and it was obviously life-changing for me. So I was in a room with a bunch of professionals, and I'm not as professional, and I swore, and I think that's when Nancy fell in love with me and pretty much wanted me to be on board. So then in like March of 2014, I was approached by them, at the time, crisis centers were helping with taking text messages, and Common Ground became one of the crisis centers, and I was approached to help develop a training for volunteers. And so I trained the first, it was like 20 people in New York, and it just sort of blossomed from there. I had a little bit of a vacation. I had cancer, and then, but when I came back, I continued that role, and then they were sort of renting me from Common Ground, basically, and then we just decided that, you know, we need to cut the middleman out, and so I was their very first remote employee, because I wouldn't move to New York.
And here you are, and 20 volunteers to 1,900 volunteers.
Right.
So Bart, I'm going to bring in Dr. Bart Andrews, because I don't know. So when we're talking about the average crisis response or crisis center that's doing all sorts of various contracts and various kinds of phone and chat line response, like what are the numbers like, or what do you see?
There's a huge range, and volunteers are very different than paid staff centers, right? It takes a lot more volunteers to produce, to power, to staff your line than it does paid staff, right? So you see a lot of variety, and a lot of it depends on volume. Like, you know, behavioral health response, we probably have, you know, 70, 80 FTEs handling, you know, 30,000 calls a month. Right? Chats, text, all blended in with that stuff. Other agencies to do that, you're probably talking, I'm guessing you're going to talk at least 300 or 400 volunteers to cover that same volume, would be my guess, just off the top of my head. And so, and a lot of it depends on your telephone service. So there's so many things, because a lot of it depends on if you're trying to answer all of your calls in a certain amount of time, right? Some centers just make sure that they have people on staff all the time, and they're not really focused on how quickly calls are getting answered, right? So with CTL, to know how to compare, but some of the really large centers have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, right? Mm-hmm. And some centers are really small. There's some centers I've seen as small as that have like 30 or 40 volunteers, and they're much smaller shops. I don't know, like how many, like Common Ground, how big is Common Ground in terms of their volunteer pool?
I know it's grown. I know Amelia just did an assist that was like 24 people that they're bringing on. So I don't know, though. I haven't been, you know, I'm not on that ground anymore, unfortunately. So love all the people, though.
Yep. And like, well, the VA has like hundreds of FTEs on the VA hotline, right? So there's
absolutely. And I think they're going to be hiring, I want to say like 400 more for a shop in Atlanta.
So a lot of it is about scalability, right? And I think that's one of the things at CTL with the volunteer and the national volunteer model and remote. Everything's remote with CTL, right, Jen?
Yeah, and I think a uniqueness about our volunteers too is the fact that they're remote, but we also have deaf and hard of hearing crisis counselors. We have visually impaired crisis counselors. There's an opportunity there to volunteer for people who, you know, social anxiety, people who are able to give back and really want to dive into volunteering and helping people, but really just don't have the skills to do it at a regular center. So I think that's a really unique and pretty awesome part of what we do with our volunteers.
So can you tell us a little bit about how volunteering with Crisis Text Line is accessible for folks with different abilities versus a traditional shop?
Well, sure. Like for visually impaired, for example, they have their readers for their computers, right? And so as our tech department, we are really conscious of how that appears on the readers. So we want to make sure they're going to be able to say, so like the fonts, the colors that we choose for our platform, the different products that we come out, we always are thinking of that as well. Like, so we're always.
Whoa. You're going to have to explain, I can't run the camera. You're going to have to explain about products that come out, because this is another difference between Crisis Text Line when you guys started talking about what you do versus a regular call center, like with Bart's talking about his shop.
Okay. I'll go back then to product. So Crisis Text Line, you know, we say we're a tech company first, you know, and that because it's where it came from, you know, tech, but mental health is a huge, obviously, aspect of it. And that's where we're helping other people out there. So in order to create different products to help better our crisis counselors than our texters, we have products. And so, for example, the platform itself is a product. That's where everyone logs into to do the work. We don't use phones to text the people back. We use our computers, and so that is a tech. And then changing on there, like I'll talk a little bit about the Q algorithm and stuff like that. But the changes that we make, it goes through a process and a product process, and so then it's shipped out, and that's where the products come. And we're changing. We probably ship. We ship products every week. It just depends on the severity of it, you know, like if it's a huge thing versus a little change.
So one of the things for you guys to keep in mind is that with Crisis Text Line, they're doing technology platform updates and additions and revisions, you know, on a really constant, relatively rapid turnover basis. And there are technology products that are part of their platform that allow folks with different ability levels or different kinds of ability concerns to volunteer. And so that's where we were going with that.
Right. And so with the volunteer, the hard of hearing, or the visually impaired, with their screen readers, we have people on our we call them crisis counselor product group, and they sort of test out the new things, so then we know that it's beneficial for them. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're providing a product that's helpful for them and doesn't hinder their process of helping a texter. And our deaf of hard of hearing, you know, we adapted our training to have closed captioning, which was really helpful. And we had a whole cohort of deaf and hard of hearing people, and our function to talk to them is via chat. So we're able to just message them, and it's a really great form of communication for both of us as a supervisor and as a crisis counselor.
And I want to make sure that I understand and I got to visit CTL this summer. Like your shop in Chelsea is like totally cool. Like one of the things that I learned was that you specifically have a sizable volunteer population from the deaf and hard of hearing, and you also have a significant group of people who use your platform like as crisis texters from that community, because that particular medium is appropriate, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because what we've recognized is those texters who are deaf of hard of hearing, you know, their language, it's a different language. And so when you're reading it as a crisis counselor, it doesn't seem like the normal English. And so you have to sort of adjust the way that you are speaking as well. And we've learned so much from our volunteers on ways to recognize that and ways to better communicate and make sure that it's a positive experience for the person on the other end.
Bart, how does this compare with like how traditional centers might handle these issues?
Well, I mean, again, it depends. Like at an agency like Behavioral Health Response, we do similar things on a smaller scale. We develop a lot of our own IT infrastructure. We beta test things. We roll out products and roll out changes through technology all the time. So at places like BHL, Behavioral Health Link in Atlanta, and Protocol, which is a big crisis system, and do all kinds of different things. They do a lot of this stuff all the time. Some smaller crisis lines are going to be much more dependent on external vendors, and using updates. And I think so. I think that one of the things is that if you've seen one crisis line, you've seen one crisis line, and so it's really hard to answer these questions specifically because there's really no mean or modal crisis line, right? There's so much variety in terms of what crisis centers use and what they do. So I think there's the having that huge that tech background and that tech support behind CTL is a major advantage, right? right? Because most crisis lines are in contact centers. Most contact centers are primarily contact centers that are focused on meeting the needs of the crisis calls and chats, and they don't have that driving tech force behind them. So there's some.
Can you explain what a contact center is for some of our?
So we're trying to get away from it. This is really hard because I've been calling it a call center for 18 years, but we're moving away from the language of call center. Because at this point, most crisis centers are contact centers. They do text, they do chat, they do phone, and they do mobile outreach. So BHR truly was always a contact center anyway. It never was just a call center. So, and in fact, at the private sector end, they're dropping the term call center altogether. All the big contact center groups, they've changed the name to contact center, which really is a much better description of what we're doing, right? Because phones are just one part of what everybody's doing these days. And if, for instance, CTL is never going to call itself a contact call center, because I don't envision you guys ever doing phone calls, would be my guess, right? I don't know.
We have a question for you, Jen. So one of our tweeters, and I lost it, I can't find it in the feed, was asking, so how do you guys, when you're rolling out new tech products for this, like, so quickly, how reliable are they? What if there are glitches? Can you move that fast, and does it still scale up? And I'm wondering if you can talk about that process.
Sure. I'm not a techie, and I'm not the hoodie guy that's, on his computer or anything, but what I do know is shit happens. Sometimes we have, we'll roll out something and there's a bug and there's little glitches. And again, our tech team is in-house. So everything that is built is in-house. So we are like, I don't want to say they're 24/7, but they are working hard to squash that bug, or they'll remove it and change the code back until they get it, all streamed out. But we try not to roll anything out unless it's been thoroughly tested. And making sure there's no bugs there. But again, like I said, shit happens. And so you never can really prepare for that. And, one of my superpowers is I get on the platform and I calm our crisis counselors down. I'm like, hey, just breathe, it's okay. This is going to happen. Our textures are never really dropped. They just think it's that normal, normal lag in communication via text messaging. And so it's like, they're so worried about our crisis counselors, but really we've got it all under control. It's just a minor hiccup in the road. So.
Yeah, and I will say that I have been there, and so I think the different experience for me is that if you go into a crisis text line, and I've been in versus a regular contact center, you have a small staff. There will be like every Tuesday, or you guys have a meeting. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. You run through all your products and where each of them are. You have your counselors who are there. You have your folks who are doing supervision and training who are there. You have your tech team who is there, and everybody sort of puts in their piece. And then there's follow-up, and then you go over and Chris, who's adorable, and then you've got Bob in the back crunching numbers, and then there are people up there like testing the product sort of right there in sight of the people who are supervisors on the platform working on the training.
Right. I mean, the beauty of it is we do have supervisors who are local in New York, right, by the office. So they'll come in, and that's a really great opportunity for our training, or for our tech team, to be able to watch it. They're on the other side, so be able to watch and how to improve. Just having, one of our engineers watching one of our conversations and like, oh my God, we can streamline this. This will be better. Let's break this down and see if we can create a product that's even going to help you go faster. And I think that's really crucial. We love being remote too, but I think it is helpful to have a few of our supervisors in that area to come into the office directly.
Bart, any thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because more and more folks are moving to a remote model. Centerstone has almost a completely remote contact center. I think that they all their crisis counselors handle remote. We're moving to a remote model. Protocol does an amazing job with remote. I think a big chunk of their workforce is remote now. But there's challenges with remote in terms of culture, and people do crave physical contact, even if that physical contact is face-to-face video. So you've got to be creative, and you've got to what we've learned, because we're at the process of rolling out 10% of our folks remote. So it's going really well. But we're also finding that people, particularly if they've been brought up in an office culture, they miss the office culture a little bit, right? People, and some people, and it's very individual. Some people are like, I love remote. I'll never want to go back in. Other folks really miss that. Yeah,
Sorry.
nope. I don't know if, yeah.
I think
Hoodies are required, pants are optional. And I think I'm just envisioning a lot of remote workers with hoodies on and nothing else. And the image is disturbing me now that I bring it up.
Thanks for being out loud.
You gotta grab them by the, I'm not gonna.
We're just below the belt on this.
SPSM, so professional.
But I think this is how we're leveraging technology, because there's absolutely no reason at this point with good technology, there's no reason that contact center staff need to be in an office. And that gets to the scalability. For instance, there's no way CTL could be scalable if they were trying to do this from local offices, right? And get people in physically. I'll just say it. They would not be able to meet their demand if they didn't have a remote model, plain and simple. There's no way.
You're right.
So
and
Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about, like you were saying, that face-to-face connection, and it is really important. I mean, I have my husband behind me when I'm working. I mean, not here in my office, but
like Trump behind Hillary at the debate, like that.
Yeah, he likes to hump the chair behind me all the time.
Oh.
So anyway, we hashtag humping chairs. And so with that, what we'd like to do is what I started was this meetup. So we try to congregate people who are local, in a certain area, and we try to create like a place where they can go to Starbucks or whatever and get to know each other. And I think that's really been beneficial for our crisis counselors to get to know each other and know that they're in the area. And some people actually will work together. Like they've met and they'll be like, hey, you're on this shift. Okay, well, I'll go on that shift and we can work together and be together. And that's really cool. And another thing though, with our volunteers, because you said the scalability is, and I don't know when we'll talk about it, but we're doing something this weekend. Okay. Go. This weekend, Thursday to Saturday, we are having what we call a CTL Palooza. And basically, it's a big hug fest, love fest for our crisis counselors, a way to thank them. We have Jamie from To Write Love on Our Arms, he's going to be speaking. And of course, Nancy is, this dynamic person and amazing. And I have a little bit of a celebrity status. I don't know, it's kind of weird. But so it's going to be really fun. And they're going to have like breakout sessions. We have a room full of puppies. I mean, that's happening. A room full of puppies for people to go for self-care.
Bart, look at your face. So explain the idea of the room full of puppies and explain how this pulls it. Okay, so first of all, full disclosure, I'm going to this. I'm not going to be at NASCOD. I'm super thrilled about the puppies. Go for it.
Yes. The puppies came about, like, it was kind of a joke. Nancy and I were talking and all of us were talking about different breakout sessions. I'm like, you know what? We need like a self-care room. I go, we need like a room full of fluffy puppies or whatever. And then I sort of broke it down. I was like, maybe it could be shelter dogs, and then we could get some adoptions out of it and it would be really cool. So it's going to be fun regardless, but we have room full of massage chairs. I'm hosting karaoke one night. I mean, we have a ton of I know. I do Proud Mary really well. So we have like a bunch of things going on, and we have a few main stage that we're streaming live through Facebook, which is going to be great for our remote crisis counselors who are now able to make it to Austin. So they'll be able to see all the main stage stuff, and then the breakout sessions are just different topics. It's really like the volunteers are going to be really, running it. We're just sort of facilitating it, like texters that stuck with them or self-harming texters. We have like updating products, new things, and surprise and delight, stuff like that. So it's going to be really this awesome, like, just way to get to know our crisis counselors, have that face-to-face, and it's just really going to engage them to want to continue,
So one of the things that someone is saying is that they do volunteering remotely, and they said, being able to sit in your hoodie and respond to crisis texts with your cat on your lap is like really a great way to. And I will say this because I do telework now.
Pussy lap pussy. Can we say that? Can that be a hashtag?
Crisis pussy.
We've. At this point, whatever you want, Jen.
I've really gone down the toilet.
At this point, you can't. You just go free. You're free. You're free.
You guys, you do not give me rule sets to follow. Okay.
We don't have. There's only one rule of SPSM that you talk about SPSM.
All right. Hashtag SPSM.
That's the only rule.
I just have to come home because I'm driving. So I'm like, I just basically have to come home without adopting a puppy. Is basically what you're telling me.
Yes. You just have to make sure not to come home with them.
Because my cat will lose her mind.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be really a great, I mean, it's our first time doing it. We're really excited about it. It's going to be an annual thing. It sort of came about jokingly at our staff retreat. We were calling it the Burning Man, and it just rolled out, and we thought, this is awesome. We need to get all of these people who work remotely to a place, and we offered scholarships for people to be able to come, you know, and I think it's just going to grow and grow and grow every year. So it'll be really
Stop Texas Suicide's asking for a link to the Palooza, and she also went ahead and hashtag CTL Palooza. She was like, do you have a hashtag? And by the way, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stop Suicide. You mean for the live feed?
Yeah, like, so you might want to tell people how to, if they want to watch along, because it looks like people are asking for links to watch along. They may need to go, I think, like the Facebook page, right?
Well, it's you have to be part of the Facebook group, the community, the small community that we have, the Facebook page. What's going to happen though, live, you won't be able to watch it live, but it is going to be available on YouTube and stuff. And I'll make sure to tweet it out for everyone to be able to watch it.
So volunteering has its privileges. You can be part of the closed Facebook group. You'll be able to, if you're already a volunteer and part of that group, you'll be able to see it live. But if not, it will eventually be posted on YouTube. It will be available, Lisa, so that you will be able to get the information that is shared. And that's an excellent use of social media.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, so I don't want to just don't hold me to it. But from the last that I heard from Chris, our CTO, it was going to be live in the Facebook group, but I could be completely wrong. So if so, I will tweet it out, or you will tweet it out, Doc Foreman, and you know, to your multiple millions of people that you are.
I will be there. I will definitely be, like, if I can Periscope or tweet or do whatever, I'll get permission, but like whatever.
As long as you're not into small breakouts, you can Periscope and tweet whatever you want.
Jeez, this is like, I don't wear jeans very often. And like, this is like the most casual conference ever. Like, this is even more casual than the computational linguistics people. And I'm like, I need casual clothes, but we're working on it.
I'll just bring some extra t-shirts to throw over your dress.
I think I may just like bring my t-shirt from the Mighty.
There you go. Perfect.
So Jen, so tell us a little bit about some of the supervision processes, because you actually have designed your platform to really facilitate the fact that you guys are basically dealing with 2,000 remote volunteers, and you need supervisors to be able to do a lot.
Yes. So, you know, we manage it. It varies depending on the shift. Obviously, like the later shifts have more volunteers because we have more texters coming in. So we try to, like, you know, we pad it based on that. But in an average day, like, I'll just go through, because my shifts, I can tell you on my shifts. So like Friday nights, you know, we're busy. I probably have, I could have between 5 to 20 volunteers, right? And if each volunteer is in a conversation, I have that conversation. It's kind of cool. I mean, I'm not going to give away too much, but they look like little Monopoly cards, because it's like color coded. So our volunteers can take more than one conversation at a time. And so you know, so they're sort of color coded in that way, and it's really cool. The beauty is, like, you know, we're not watching every single conversation, because, you know, they know their shit, except for our, like, newbies, we call them, like, our chicks, our baby chicks, and we're watching them. So you're able to really, and because it's an asynchronous vibe, you know, you don't have to be listening the whole time, and you're not going to miss something because we have the transcript right there, so we're able to scroll back. So it can be challenging, but it's also really much easier. I mean, from day one to now, the change has been just phenomenal, and so much easier for us as we've grown to scalability. So it's not overwhelming for our supervisors. We're able to do that, and we're a team, so we can reach out if we feel overwhelmed. So
now, my understanding is also crisis text line. Well, actually, before we do that, because I'm about ready to go down a different path. Bart, thoughts, reactions, comparisons with traditional centers?
Well, I think that it's a similar model. I think, well, text is very different. It's much easier to monitor chat and text than phone calls. But live monitoring phone calls, which is what many centers do, and we record phone calls, is extremely cumbersome, right? It sucks up all your time and energy to listen to one call. You can screen and move through text and chats much quicker to get a sense of what's going on. So there are different mediums, right? So and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. So I think the model is really similar. Some centers do a lot more kind of hand-holding and monitoring and support. Other centers get you up and rolling, and they don't have the resources to do a lot of monitoring. So the fact that CTL is doing that level of oversight is very impressive. So I think from looking at the feed, people are just fascinated. This is really cool. I think the big question, you talked a little bit about supervisors watching, when there's a traumatic event, if somebody does, for instance, attempt, or there's a major sentinel event, what's the debriefing process? How does that work? What do you guys do? What kind of supports are available for staff? That was one of the questions we want to get at for sure.
Oh, sure. No, that's a great question because it is really important. I mean, debriefing in any of our, any of the agencies, that's a really key thing because we deal with serious shit. But what we have here at Crisis Texon, which is unique too, is we have this queue algorithm. And what's really cool about that is if anybody's texting in and they use the words like die, hang, pills, whatever, it bumps it right up as a high priority. So that's the next conversations that's getting taken. And the supervisors flag that, like it's automatically flagged. So we're able to see it and watch that as it goes. And so, I think it's a similar process with active rescues. Kind of a product that we're working on is, we call it the pizza tracker. I mean, I don't know if you know Domino's pizza tracker, that app. We're talking about that as our active rescue tracker, is to let the crisis counselors know, because we're on the phone. They don't know who, we're talking with the police. They don't know the process. So we're working on something that'll help get them through the process too. So they know, they're not just hanging there not knowing what's going on. They know, okay, your supervisor's on with the police said this, and so we're working on a really cool feature to help streamline that too. But I think that the Q algorithm is really cool because it's like the self-learning machine. And so like, I think it was last year, KMS came up, right? And we didn't even know what KMS was, and it turned out to be kill myself. And so the algorithm learned that, and so now that's part of the code orange words. And if a supervisor's watching a conversation and it may not have come up code orange, and we see we can flag it as code orange. So then we know that that's a high risk conversation. So we're able to move these cards around that I talked about, make them bigger, make them flag, make sure that we're, more aware of that conversation. It's just a really great way for multiple conversations. Obviously, like I said, the cumbersome of being on the phone, you only are able to listen to one conversation. We've had crisis counselors take up to 5 conversations at a time. But those are more extreme. Those are more, like I call them the Jedis. They're the ones who know a lot more about that. So, but
Bart?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that what'd you have, April? Go ahead.
I know you were just making Bart face, and I was like, okay.
Well, we got this. So there's because there's so much. I mean, the thread. So Jen, just the thread is just popping. You can tell when folks are really interested in this. There's so much. We probably should do another show on this, to be quite honest, because there's so much to talk about.
Yep.
So one of the questions was about, for instance, best practice on how to respond by text. Right? What are phrases? And are folks using stock phrases? Are there pre-programmed phrases? Are there certain techniques that work better? And the question is, a lot of social workers now, and a lot of mental settings are using text in various forms. And is there guidance or support or tips that CTL can just share generally with the community, so to benefit from the knowledge that you guys are gathering?
Yeah, absolutely. We do in our training, which is kind of cool because Michelle, our director of training, is amazing, and she's creating a textbook basically. And we're still debating, we're still thinking it's probably going to be beneficial for everyone, and we might go public with it and let people use it. And I think it's going to be a great tool, like you said, for regarding text messaging. But for now, we do have our standard messages. You can use your example messages and stuff, and then you get that "Are you a robot?" type of people. So it's really like finding your own voice. In the very beginning, you just drilled in with those common, just like on the phone, like those common phrases, those common feeling words, those common tentifiers and all of that. But as you do it more and more and more, you get a better vibe, and you get your voice in there, and it's like, I'm unique. I can't say, you know, a lot. And Nancy's quite funny too. When Nancy jumps on the platform and takes conversations at 4 a.m. every, you know, she's just ridiculous. She's pretty awesome CEO that way. But you know, it's very similar to what you guys do, like probably with your text and chat. It's just a little bit, I think, more intense regarding just text, you know, because there is that a disconnect, but there's a very minimal disconnect now because that's the main form of communication.
Are there things that you find are important that are different from verbal communication that you have to do when you're doing a text format? Are there little tips, things that really are things when you're texting with somebody are really important to do that may not apply to phone, or something that's important that's specific to text engagement?
I think, you know, because we don't hear the sighs or the likes, you know, like they just don't have that, or the long pause in that sense, like when you're on the phone. I think with text messaging, when there's one word answers, I mean, you can't ask a lot of questions in a row, you know, you still want that open-ended question. And I think that's that's probably one of the more key points to text messaging, is that open-ended, because you really want them to lead the conversation. Just like everywhere else, but in this way, it's more of like, you want them to really give us a meaty message back so we can work with that. And so, and as crisis counselors, you know, we only have 140 characters, you know, you really got to have a meaty message. You can't just string it along. So
two questions, because this is really interesting stuff. One, if you go over 140 characters, does it just lump those two together so that is that what you guys do, or you instruct your staff to always keep it to under 140 characters? That's the first question. I got a second question. So what about that one?
Sure. What we've done is sort of like the tweeting style, the 140 characters. We can receive, because that's generally like most of the mobile carriers, that's their limit as well. We can receive messages from other people, and it'll like say 1 of 2, 2 of 2, 3 of 2. On our end though, we'd have to send another message to continue that conversation.
Got it. So that's cool. That's really important. What do you do with silence when you're a texter? Because we do a lot of texting, and we found out the hard way that people text, and particularly young folks, don't text synchronously at all, and they take breaks. And often at times when you're really not wanting them to take a break. So what do you guys do? What do you do with silences? Do you have time limits? What do you guys do? How do you work with silence? And
yeah, no, we'd have time limits, you know, because it's funny because you said young people, because the most common texters, you know, during the day they're in school. So they're in class, and there is those breaks, you know, whether you're like, they're in class, okay, so, yes, you know, that's going to be, so we just give them, you know, the standard, like we wait like 10 minutes and then check in and see if they're there. And if they don't respond, you know, just do one more check-in, and then just wrap it up nicely, just, you know, based on whatever the conversation was or whatever, try to wrap it up, and just encourage them to use their coping skills or text us back when they have more time.
Got it. Great stuff.
That's another thing that I think is a little bit different from just doing a call or phone, is that text can really, like, they could like go put it on pause and sort of start up again. And in a phone call, yeah. You also, I think by text, and make sure I understand this correctly, but by text, you kind of get to think about what you're about ready to message. So it's not, I don't think texting really often is as conversational. Like, you're really thinking about what you're saying and you're composing it, which is, I think, different than doing crisis by phone, in my experience.
No, it is different, because you are able to sort of like come up with a better word or something, like more like you can reach out to your supervisor and have that moment of like, I need help with this, you know, can you walk me through this? And, you know, we try to respond within 2 minutes. I mean, that's our goal. We don't want to have that long hang time, you know, and we're really good at that. But I think it is definitely a difference from the phone line, because you can process a little bit. Sometimes you can overthink, you know, and I'll say, I'm like, don't overthink it, go with your gut, you know, to our crisis counselors. Because they feel they want the perfect thing, and it's like, you know, nothing's perfect, and just, you know, do what you learned and everything is going to work out, and it always does.
Bart, thoughts? You're making Bart face again.
So it's a very different environment than talking, and so it's really interesting working with people that do both phone and text. You find that there are some people that are really good at phone and some people that are really good at text, and there's some people that can do both, right? But there's some people that don't cross as well. right? And so what with space and with those silences, 2 minutes between responses, and also kind of gauging if is that pause a natural pause? Is there something else going on? What are the things that you find differentiate a really good text or from somebody that's going to have a harder time engaging people via text?
I'm not sure I understand the full question.
So what kind of characteristics distinguish a really good text crisis line worker from somebody that's going to struggle being a text crisis line worker?
Yes.
That's a much more succinct question that actually gets to the question I wanted to ask.
Okay. Well, no. They go through 34 hours of training online. They learn that this is all basically the same. The way we do things. They have to have some kind of tech background. I mean, like comfort level. I mean, our volunteers are from 18 to 79. We have a 79-year-old volunteer who's amazing, but they have to have that comfort, So if you're not comfortable with technology or computer, crisis text line is not the right place for you to be volunteering, because you're going to have those hurdles, and it's going to be frustrating, and that's not what we want to do for anybody. We want people to be in a comfortable environment.
So one of the things that I'm hearing are some interesting things about some of the numbers, and I'm seeing this in the Twitter feed. So one is Bill Schmidt saying he's not fond of crisis responders being limited to these 140 characters. That's not, but if you've seen Bill Schmidt's documentation clinically, if you'd understand that. And the second thing is people sort of being astonished by the 5 minute or less wait time. I would love to hear what you and Bart think about that.
You got to have you got to have a cutoff, right? You've got to set the limit somewhere, because there's lots of folks trying to get in, right? So I think the real challenge is when you've picked up there might be some risk present, right? And then you've got to use your judgment about what you're going to do. But if somebody decides to text you and then they go to class for an hour, I don't know about CTL, but we're not going to leave that chat screen open for an hour. That we're just not going to do it. We've got about 5 minutes, and we'll tell folks. But it's case by case. There's some cases where it's clear. We'll reach out again and say, hey, I really need to hear from you. And you can tell from the context that they're not. But sometimes people just check out because they're back in their life. And Jen can probably give us some feedback on this. But it's amazing how people can be in the midst of the most amazing crisis, and they're like, oh, I gotta go to the store and get milk, and then I've got to go. It's like, oh, okay, then go do your life, because people live their lives even in the midst of a crisis.
Right, and we use that. I mean, that's they're part of their plan of action. Go to the grocery store, enjoy the fruit or whatever. Go sniff some mangoes.
Sniff mangoes?
Yeah, and there's no subtext to that, unlike some of the other inappropriate things we've said. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm a crapshoot. You guys have no idea what's going to come out.
A crapshoot? Crap. Oh, okay. I didn't know if they did something different.
No, they shoot with their left hands. That's crabs shoot with their left. With the 5 minute wait time, we were saying we respond within 5 minutes of a texter coming into our queue. And again, it goes back to that queue algorithm of if it's a high risk conversation, we call it code orange, so they get bumped up right away. We have a partnership with YouTube, and so generally the texters that come in and using the keyword that we have with YouTube is safe, we know that they've been looking at some more darker, deeper things on YouTube, and that's when our number comes up and says, do you need to talk to someone? So we know that one also is one that would, potentially be a code orange conversation too. And so, like I said, with the cool thing is like our crisis counselors can take more than one conversation, and so no matter how many is in there, I mean, we get spikes. We had a huge spike when Robin Williams died. We had a huge spike when, I don't even know, someone tweeted us. Can't even remember now, but they thought they were Ricky Dillon, it was a YouTuber, and he thought.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, those are unique situations, but we have a really great percentage of our wait time. I mean, it's like in the 90s, and that's really awesome.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So I know this is going to be a surprise, but we're only 10 minutes to final thoughts, and we've probably only covered about 50-60% of what was on the list. Really quickly, Jen, and we've also sort of done it maybe not quite
I want to know, do they have emojis? Can they use emojis? Do you guys have emojis? Oh my God.
Okay, so Bart, we don't do emojis to our texters. We are able to receive them, but we don't give emojis back simply because.
Oh man, that's cool though that you can receive emojis.
Yeah, on our chat, like on the side where we communicate with each other, we have like random chat and global chat, and it's really cool. And debrief chat, we talked about debriefing. There's this place where they can either debrief with their supervisor, DM, one-on-one, or peer-to-peer support. So that's really where we get our debriefing from. But we have emojis, and we finally got a unicorn one, and I'm really excited.
I don't know if you knew this, Jen, but one of the things that we found in the NLP stuff is that they have NLP analyses of emoji use and suicide risk and mental wellness, and people who aren't doing well and who might be on their way to a suicide attempt tend to start using fewer emojis, which is like so totally interesting. Part of how we communicate that seems to be tied to.
No, I could see that, because I could have someone start off with like 7 crying emojis, and then you can see that it like decreases a little bit in the intensity of the conversation. So it totally makes sense.
So
I wanted to
go ahead. I was going to say, we had actually a rather ambitious list, and I wanted to like give you a chance to triage what was left on that list.
Okay, well, data is really important. People love data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the cool thing is we have crisistrends.org, if no one's familiar with it. It's a website that we have, and all of the data that we have coming in from our texters, we strip all of their personal identifying information, and we have it on crisistrends.org. And so the cool thing about the data is back in June, we knew that LGBTQ issues were remarkably less, because it was the same time that same-sex marriages became legal in, nationwide. So that was really cool. Or we know the word ibuprofen that's used in a conversation is 16 times more likely somebody who's thinking about suicide. And so this is the data that we're able to pull, and it's really quite fascinating.
Okay, go back to the ibuprofen one. That is really fascinating. It's also interesting based on some data I know about another place. So tell us more.
About the data that we pull?
Yeah, how did the ibuprofen data happen?
We just saw that the algorithm saw that combination of words, and ibuprofen being one of them, and we just pulled it out, and it was like Bob's data. Bob's brain is, I don't know if you've ever had Bob on this show.
I often make that sound every time I see Bob inside of me.
It's amazing. He would be a wonderful guest about data. You guys would be blown away. So
IBP in text context, IBP in a text indicates increased risk?
Yeah, ibuprofen it means increased risk. Yeah, it's generally one of those. Sorry, that was getting on my annoying. So anyway, so another thing that we use, I'm trying to think on crisis trends is, we can say that eating disorders, Sunday nights is when we get the most texts on eating disorders, LGBTQ, Wednesdays, you can see it broken down by days, by time of the day, by which is the highest state that has, whatever suicidal ideations. The most common state is Montana, and so what does that tell us? It tells us that we really need to drive into those reservations, those Native American reservations, and really try to provide more support there, or, the isolation that they feel in that area. And so we actually have a keyword partner with the state of Montana. So people text in and it's MT, and we'll know that they're coming from the state of Montana. And so it helps, sort of gives us a sneak peek of who our keyword partners are, a sneak peek of what the potential crisis is. So it's really cool.
So Bart, I'm wondering if you can react to this. So one of the things that Crisis Text Line does is they do, they're looking at their own data, and they've also recently partnered so that they can have open data for not-for-profits and academic partners to start to analyze some of their content and see if they're interesting insights. I know there's data we ask their name at this point, not at this point, because their traditional training is this, but our calls went better when we did it like this. They're able to do a lot of analysis of what's happening during their calls, and in a lot of different ways. How do the traditional centers manage that?
Well, I mean, the first thing a traditional center is going to ask is, where in the hell is all this money coming from to support this incredible infrastructure? That's going to be most crisis centers do not have the pockets behind them to have this level of support. So that'd be I could tell you, if we were at NASCAD right now, people would be like, where's your money coming from? That would be the question.
And the answer is?
Nancy's a baller. I mean, she's a fucking baller. She's amazing at raising money. And it's all private foundations and private, just different companies and different foundations that are supporting us. I mean, it's.
And if you're on SPSM much, and you know that we streamed live with DJ Patil, who is the director of the White House Office of Technology and Science Policy, and he talked about, Nancy just recently announced $35 million in grants from Melinda Gates and other places, related to that. So they're able to hire a data science, but that came with sort of the understanding that they would be providing data, which is, I mean, so if you're asking the money questions.
Right, and a lot of partners, that's where our partners will come in. A different level of partnership, where, you pay a certain amount and you're able to get a certain amount of data too that is pulled in your specific area or whatever. So really, it's amazing.
It's incredible, because think about this. The federal government is talking about possibly releasing 30 million for the entire nation to be spread across how many different agencies for adult suicide prevention. Right. And people have been fighting tooth and nail to get $30 million. That doesn't even look like it's actually going to come through. But here CTL has 35 million that they got. So, I mean, the scale and I think one of the things from a crisis center perspective, the level of the depth of the resources are really quite mind-blowing, right? I mean, it's not even in the ballpark. So there's something very different there. In terms of the ability to analyze data like that, nobody's even coming close to that, right? Nobody's doing anything like that because they don't have the resources to do it. It's expensive. And I'm fascinated. This is such a huge, huge data source. And the ibuprofen thing, to me, is just fascinating because we know suicide is connected to pain. We know that suicide and depression are connected to inflammation. And to see that this trend is showing up in the actual, right, so to see this showing up in the actual content of text, and that it's predictive of suicide, I mean, the potential of the data, there's amazing.
Well, I think you sort of said, like, they don't have the resources, right? But you kind of do, because we're looking for people. I mean, our goal, and it's not just because we're Crisis Text Line, we're all here to do the same thing. We want to help people, right? That's ultimately our goal, is to help people in pain. And as at Crisis Text Line, like I mentioned with the partnership, it can be that one source of truth, like if you partner with Crisis Text Line, you'll have all of that data, you'll have all of that information that'll help you with grants, that'll help you with funding. And it'll be all of us, we're doing all the work, and your centers are reaping the benefits, not utilizing any additional resources, because we have our 1,900 volunteers. We're looking obviously way more than that. As we grow, we're rolling out volunteers probably 150 to 200 every 2 weeks. So so you kind of do have that, and like I would love to be like an ultimate, like, big, hairy, audacious goal for me would be like having 741 be like 911, just one number for people to remember to call in crisis or to text in crisis. That would be like just the ultimate goal.
Reactions.
And we're going internationally too. So that's another thing.
Yeah, I mean, crisis centers can partner, but they don't have the funding for the bodies. They may not have a volunteer model, and they're primarily taking phone calls, which is where the bulk of their efforts are going and where their funders are demanding they do that. So it's not just as simple. So it sounds beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It sounds absolutely beautiful, but it's not simple that crisis, we're just going to join Crisis Text Line, because that's not how the system's set up. You've got all these disparate funding sources, and funders have demands and regional demands. So there's all kinds of interesting ways we can work together.
Yeah, I'm going to stop, like, for folks who are not as familiar, and we've got final thoughts in 2 minutes, but we need to probably talk about this because one of the things for folks who are not a part of the crisis center world is that the kinds of crisis interventions that you can do, the technology that you set up, the standards that you practice on, a lot of those things are really tied to who is funding this. And in folks who are partnering with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if you're getting any of that money, or if you are a partner, there's certain standards. True.
There's no money there.
And if you're working with Crisis Text Line, they're getting donors, and so what they can do. So what you can do has a lot to do with who volunteers and where the funding comes from. And Bart's funding for his shop come from contracts. Like, there's not just one contract. You have many pots of money.
Oh,
right?
we've got hundreds of pools of revenue stream to support what we're doing. Yeah. Yeah, there's some that are bigger than smaller than, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Crisis Text Line, so because they're using a different, like a tech, like venture capital sort of like model, it really, really changes what they can do. And talk about that a little bit more, Jen.
Well, where to go with that. It does change the model. I mean, it does make us, like I said, we're able to bring in a lot of in-house. We don't have to reach out to, outside sources, white label, like off the shelf stuff. We can really just build it ourselves, and it's really cool. Obviously, if there's something that's awesome, like, yeah, we'll try to work with that too. But it's with the volunteering, I mean, with the partnership and stuff, it's like, and I understand like all of the dynamics of the different grants and the different people that you have to deal with. Cause yeah, I mean, everybody has that. And, even Crisis Text Line, we have people that we have to, show numbers to. I think the beauty of it is that the amount of volunteers that we have and the people, the passion behind it, they really are our front lines. They're the ones who do all the work. And if we didn't have that many volunteers working 24/7, we really wouldn't be working ourselves.
So just really quickly, people are really, really interested in the data set from Crisis Text Line. I want to let you guys know that, first of all, tweet out at Crisis Text Line. They'll tweet you back. Bailey Greensburg, who some of you have met, and she shows up at all sorts of events. Many of you have met her face-to-face. It's a great contact to email if you want to talk about how you get access to the data in the future. I think you sort of vetted initially, I think, like 6 different organizations, but I could have that number wrong. Can you talk a little bit about data?
The crisistrends.org, free to everyone. We want that to be used for people to help people in your community. So like, we want the people like eating disorders. We want to have counselors in your school, if you recognize that, to be readily available Monday morning, knowing that there's this high risk of eating disorders and stuff. And so check it out. I mean, we've almost at 24 million messages exchanged since we started. I mean, that's freaking insane.
It's a little bit.
It's a little bit. We get at least 1,000 texters a day. And so the data, like the really driven down data, I mean, our main goal is privacy, confidentiality of our texters. We're not going to get that. We're not going to drill it all the way down to the single white female in, Iowa, down to that one city. We're going to give you a broader scale of what's being scaled down, but it really depends on that. If you do want more enclave data for your company, just go to our main website. It's crisistext.org, and there's a whole thing right on there. We're very open on that website. Everything is available. We're very transparent. So if you have any questions there, you could also check it out.
And it is time for final thoughts of all things. We've lost Tony Woodward. I'm hoping he'll check it back in to give us final thoughts. I know he's been along for the ride. Bart, did you want to start, or would you like me to?
I'll start. One, we need to have Jen back because I think there's so much, and there's research coming out about CTL that I think would be great to go over. And I think just looking at the thread, there's so many questions. And what's happening here? This is a transformative service. This is what CTL is doing is going to transform the environment for crisis services from here on out. Right? There is no doubt about it. Right? It's disruptive technology. Great. So let's learn as much as we can about it, because there's so much we're going to learn in this process, and I think it's ever so cool. And Jen came up with more cool hashtags than we've ever had in one single show, which is pretty impressive.
I'm here to entertain.
Jen, any final thoughts that you have for the evening?
No, I think it was great. I loved hearing the perspective from Bart and the different centers and stuff. And I wasn't following the thread. I'm sorry. I will go back though, and I'll try to answer questions if you have it. You can always tweet me too at Quirky Jen James. And I would love to come back because there's so much more that we can share. I mean, we're going international. I mean, that's huge. Talking more about our training process, talking more about some different products and our, the active rescues that we do and stuff. So I think there's so much more that we can learn from having another show, and I would love that. But I loved being here. Oh my God, this was so much fun.
It goes really, really fast. So we're hitting the last minute. I don't see that Tony's coming back. Definitely, there was a lot of interest in talking about your data and talking about how things are the same or different with other crisis centers and why. And that's an important thing to understand. I think my final thought is we want to do more to connect the outcomes and the data that different forms of crisis response are getting in one place for folks to really analyze, look at, compare notes. The facts are that even with crisis text line, it's not like we're broken out in enough crisis services across the country or across the globe. There just aren't. We're going to need to do more on a bigger scale in order to have what is necessary available, and we can only benefit from having like more and more ways of doing it until we really can say we have so much that we can afford to pick and choose. Tony, any final thoughts?
Crisis text line is pioneering. I mean, you're getting a little look into what sort of what I believe will be the beginning of a new sort of era, and someday will be looked back upon, and people will laugh and they will say, "Oh, wasn't that funny when they did that?" And do you remember text messaging? They will say, but this is what's happening now. I mean, this has the potential for volume. It has a potential for multiple languages. It has a potential for geospatial fencing. It has all of these things that you can do that you could never do with crisis services before. Now, what is the model going to be? We don't know. That's why the show's so interesting. So thanks, Jim, for coming and telling everybody about it. I think it's a fantastic project. It's very exciting to have you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to hug your brain. I love your brain.
He gets that a lot.
Hashtag brain hug. There we go. I got another one.
And we're at the hour. You spent another hour with SPSM. I know some of you are just tuning in. We will be back to our regular time in 2 weeks, but we're going to do one more 8 p.m. We're so thrilled that Jen has been with us. Believe me, Crisis Text Line will come back. The goal is for us to have different kinds of services, different kind of innovators, different kinds of technology, and different kinds of media, so that if you are a regular viewer at SPSM, you have a breadth of experience, and you can show up to any meeting sort of in the know rapidly about suicide prevention technology and social media. I'm at Dr. Foreman. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, #SPSM, so you can stay up to date with all the stuff we've got going on. Probably it'll be, is it CrisisCon 16 is the tag for NASCOD, Bart?
Crisis Center I don't know. I'll tweet it out. Crisis Center Conference? I'll tweet it out. I don't know.
Hashtag CTL Palooza. So hopefully you guys will hear from me this week. Stay in touch. And just a little bit of dropping a hint on you. Next week, we're going to be talking about a project we're doing with Tumblr this week. So some of the SPSMers have really gotten a cool collab with Tumblr, and you can go find out more about that on our page. But do be looking for us Saturday, the 22nd.
Heavens, it's recursive.
Yeah. Have a great week, y'all. Take care. Bye.